Good evening, good day. Let's talk about how to live righteous in a deceptive world. My name is Faith. Please subscribe and like the video before you forget. Okay, back to the topic. How to live righteous in a deceptive world. We live in a world where every aspect of our lives is bound by law. This is the age of law or of institutionalization. I'd say it started with the Magna Carta and the deposition of the aristocracy in Europe, and then they spread it to the rest of us. Or maybe it started with Constantine. But the world is being run through laws which are made to hide the taskmasters that took over from the aristocrats. This is why also companies were invented. Companies hide ownership. They transfer responsibility from people to institutions named corporations. This is the predicament that we find ourselves in. We know there are people in power, but we can't see them. We know there are people controlling us, but we can't see them. We know there are people making major decisions. These are what are called the rulers of men, and trust me, we do have rulers. Our society has transformed into a worldwide corporation, not just because we've registered corporations by the numbers, but we are one huge institution. Collectively, as a people of the world and also as individual nations. Some of our companies, some of our countries were first run by corporations. We've got the East Indian Company, and these corporations were owned by the powerful men, the powerful lords of Europe. Earlier, we lived a different kind of life. With the institutionalizations, there's come an age of mass production of goods. We used to produce in our own lands, but we've forgotten how to farm because we are busy in factories. We are mass producing not just for the profits of the multinationals, but also for our own food. We don't have any other means of producing our own foods. We can't live, or we don't have land to live off of. We are totally dependent on our taskmasters. We have learned to need our institutions, our governments. When we're not employed, we go to look for government aid. This has not always been so, and this is why our lives have become very precarious. Craft in the olden days was previously household disseminated. Your aged relatives were passing down knowledge that they had in order to make lawyers, to make artists, to make smiths, to make potters, to make singers. These were things that were passed from generation to generation. This is not so these days, because the grandmothers have been left in the village alone. The children are scattered in diverse schools. So when do they learn? Education has been commercialized and is now mass-produced in what we now call school. Now anybody can become a lawyer. Anybody, if you can afford it, can become a doctor and so on, at the expense of important virtues of society. We've forgotten to be humane, and we've given power to institutions. We do it to protect ourselves, because we say, oh, let's give government powers to protect us from our fellow men and from ourselves. But we are ending up ceding too many opportunities to institutions that have no ability. We forfeited human kindness to institutions. We've given too much power to institutions. The government is now giving everything. We've also institutionalized the church. It's now as a legal person. That's what we call companies and corporations and societies. The state is also an institution because, and I'd say it's like a company in the sense that it's developed by a constitution or laws that bring people or a certain number of people together who decide that from today we are country so and so, this is our flag, this is who we are, etc. We also have international conventions that govern the relationships between countries. These are also applied as international law. We also have international courts like the ICJ that decide inter-country disputes. We've got the Union of United Nations, which decide a lot of inter-country issues. The states, the countries are bringing up children. All countries are running children's homes. They're also educating children. They're housing children. You see how much power we've ceded to inanimate objects? This should not be so. We should know what our children are learning, and we should give them proper education, even in addition to what they are getting in school. Schools don't teach us to be humane, but they'll teach us how to be a proper employee. They'll teach you how to make money. They'll not teach you mercy or kindness. They'll not teach you to be your neighbor's keeper. Institutionalization has weakened societal structures that used to exist long before the agrarian revolution and the industrial revolution, long before the Magna Carta, long before the founding of the American nation, which introduced the concept of democracy that the rest of the world is currently governed by, especially the world that was ruled by Britain and Europe. At the expense of our long-lasting societal structures or our history or our culture, which previously emphasized love, emphasized togetherness, emphasized being your neighbor's keeper, emphasized being humane, emphasized survival. Where is our sense of survival? Can we survive a major outbreak that like we are facing right now if it goes on for 1 year? Why not? Because we don't have society anymore. We don't have land. We can't farm. Our society was not just an economic and social system. It was an accountability system. Children were accountable to their parents, who were accountable to their peers, who were accountable to elders. And if after discarding of that, individualism has bred and has been strengthened. When institutions have gained their endless supply of labor and of capital at the expense of humanities, I mean, these days people are referred to as resources together with machinery in companies. Men are working for and dependent on institutions that have discarded the basic principles of humanity. Those are the principles that sustained our forefathers for several civilizations. They went long before agrarian and industrial revolution. People survived, and it is these societies that kept them alive. Yet, we've discarded them without thought. For the reason of our conditioning and breeding, right and wrong have become a matter of institutional decisions, or we are looking onto laws to know what is right and wrong. We are looking onto what certain leaders have said is the right and wrong. This is the institutionalization of even right and wrong. It's become a regal exercise. This should not be so. A judge watching over the law should apply humanity. Case in point, the United Nations organizations wasted an opportunity during the Rwandan genocide to intervene and save lives. They spent days on end, weeks on end, months on end on interpretation of international treaties, on interpretations of vocabularies inside the international treaties, on trying to debate whether they should label it as a genocide to give them authority to intervene, or label it as a disturbance, a civil disturbance, or a war, or so forth and so forth. Meanwhile, the society was disintegrating. People were getting killed, and there was no recourse. About 1 million people lost their lives. That is the problem of overdependence of institutions. We need to go back to our conditioning. Go back to the reasoning of our forefathers. Go back to the basic principles of humanity, of godliness. Our education teaches us to look upon institutions and to blind our eyes to anything else, to look upon our textbook and blind ourselves to everything else. That's the idea of the blind lady justice, that I'll just look at the law and I don't care what any other thing is happening around the law. Now, what is presented as right is not necessarily righteous before God. Neither is what is represented as truth. Don't assume that because this book says this and it's been approved, then it's so. Godliness is like God, not anything else. When thinking of how to treat our neighbor, we first think of what the law says about it. Is it in our favor? Can we get away with it? Can we take advantage of a certain loophole? Imagine that. And when we are doing wrong, so long as it's in the law, no matter who it hurts, we have seared our conscience because the law said so. This is because the law of men has been wrongly represented as being at par with the laws of God. This is a deception. We need to awake from this deception. Not all power that is wielded by men is bad. Mercy, love, patience, empathy, faith, self-control, peace, hope, godliness, goodness. These are powers, good powers, that you can find in men in various measures and various controls depending on their maturity. There's also gentleness and righteousness. Well, depending on maturity again, and on how the people are working on themselves. Now, this is a challenge because the people are not getting an opportunity to work on themselves. These are powers that are given to God, and powers, gifts of God are grown. Institutions do not have the same capabilities. They do not have the same virtues. They cannot hold them because they don't have intelligence. They don't have a mind. They don't have a heart. They don't have the power to perceive. Institutions just act according to the law. No wonder our laws are called acts, because that's all they are. Institutions are inanimate, yet wield immense powers. They are incapable of mercy, which is sad. Depending on institutions has made it easy for people to forget virtues of humanity, because institutions are cold. They lack humanity. They lack godliness. They lack righteousness. So you can't sit as a judge and disseminate the law and not consider humanity. If you don't combine justice with humanity, it becomes injustice. The word of God remains firm. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. It's written. This is regardless of what the law says. It's we who have changed the law, not God. God's righteousness remains the same. So don't confuse the law for righteousness. If laws or institutions demand or sanction a thing that is merciless, or a thing that is iniquity or sin, it's a deception. Don't discard righteousness for a law. They are not one and the same thing. And Russia's law are a bait. Do not fall for it. Remember that the world is under the sway of the wicked one. Some of these ideas come from the wicked one because they are made by humans, and not all humans are mature. So through humanity, we are getting things that are not clean. They're not righteous. The devil devours by mischief. So you'll find a lot of mischief in all areas of our lives, be they law, institution, and so forth. Remember, because the devil is an accuser, to be an accuser, you need to know your law. So the devil is an expert in law, and he will seep into the seams of our society using the law if he's given an opportunity. We need to revise the entire legal system and the entire legal regime and our laws to give humanity space. Remember that we live in the last days and the world is slippery. Even the greatest can fall. Hold on to the truth. It's written that when you think you stand, watch out. Don't assume. Watch out lest you fall. Because falling in our current world is like that easy. Thank you for listening.